right. Well, I think I'm just going to sort of roll into things. And so, everybody, thank you so much for coming. I don't know if you guys have the book sitting in front of you. And Megan, I looked at your website and I saw you actually have a lot of books, both published and in the works. So while I suppose we'll focus most of our conversation today on Allergic, we could maybe talk about some of your other books as well. So maybe we could just start off by you introducing yourself and talking about how you became a children's book writer.
Okay, yeah, sounds great. So I'm Megan Wagner Lloyd, and I'm one of those authors who always wanted to be a writer since the time they were little. Like, it's literally in my Little Mermaid diary when I was 8. Like, I want to write children's books when I grow up. So, um, yeah, I had a few other ideas along the way, like being a marine biologist or a spy. But I mainly stuck with author. And then I had kids when I was really young. I was a stay-at-home mom, and so I was writing on the side. And I gradually, kind of grew that and was writing more and more as my kids got older. And it took me, like, let's see, I always get the numbers slightly off, but it was like 10 or 11 years from when I started to when, like, I got an agent. And during all that time, I was writing mainly novels, like middle grade MYA novels. And then, in kind of the second half of that time period, then I started writing picture books. And at the time I was in like a weekly writing critique group, and we met every week, and you would read something that you wrote. But I was finding it less and less useful to be reading like one chapter of a novel and getting feedback that way, but I needed something to like bring into my group. So I started doing picture books because it was something you could like read and get feedback on in like a short amount of time. And I started noticing I was getting a lot better feedback, like audience response on my picture books than all these novels I'd been working on. So I was like, well, maybe I can keep working on the novels, but maybe I can actually like get published with the picture books because they seem to be going better. So that became my kind of initial goal, and so it was like 11 years, and then I got an agent, and then sold the first picture book after about like 6 months with her. And so then I had 4 picture books come out, but in the meantime, I was still working on my novels, and I was getting more and more into the whole graphic novel thing. I didn't grow up reading graphic novels. I didn't know that they existed. I did read some comics, mainly Calvin and Hobbes, and really liked those. But I didn't like go to comic shops or like know that that was something you could really like be involved with. And I definitely didn't know that like you could write comics if you couldn't also draw them. So it was something I kind of gradually became aware of and gradually became more involved with, and it became kind of my side goal. I was like, I'm gonna learn how to write a graphic novel. So I literally just like checked out books from the library about like how to write comics, or and like took like free courses online. I was like, well, I always kind of consider it like a test of my interest in something, like if I'll exhaust the free resources first. Because sometimes it feels like if you like spend money, then you're like serious. But I'm like, I'll show I'm serious by using all the free resources. And then if I'm still into it, then I can spend money on it. So I just kind of did it like that. And I also like checked out, I had been reading a ton of graphic novels at this point, and I checked out ones from the library and like deconstructed them, like how many panels on a page for this style of graphic novel, how, what's the word count, all that kind of thing, to just get a sense of how things were looking for different age groups and stuff like that. And then I just and then at the same time this stuff is going on, so I was like learning how to write a graphic novel, but I didn't really know what I was gonna write one about. And at the same time this was going on, I had started to do like author visits at schools with my picture books. And I did this little like intro of, facts about me, but I wanted it to be more interactive. So I would have like the kids vote on the correct answer, like, what's my favorite food? And then they would vote what it was, and then they'd be like really excited if they got it right. And so one of the things was like, what pet do I have? And then the answer would be none, because I'm allergic to animals. And I always noticed they were like really interested in that, because it's like they all either have a pet or they want a pet, and they're like, what? You're allergic to animals? And then, of course, there's like the kids with allergies who weren't surprised as much by it and were like, oh, I can relate. You know, I haven't. And then I'd have like kids raise their hand, like, if you have an allergy too? And I'd be like, and like, you know, like a third of the hands would go up. And so I was realizing, wow, this is something I always thought was really boring about my life. Like, my allergies, like, it just always seems so boring. And then, but like, kids are really interested in it. And so those two things came together. I was like, this seems like something kids would actually enjoy having a story built around. And it seems like something that would fit in this graphic novel form I'm so excited to write about. So I, started writing it. And I'd written about 5 chapters, and I had an outline, some like character sketches, not drawings, but like, written character sketches. And at that point I sent it to my agent, and she really liked it. And she was like, you know what, because with picture books, you don't like choose an illustrator to work with, except very rarely. Like, you sell the manuscript and then the publisher chooses an illustrator. But she was like, okay, you know what, like, let's do something new. Let's like look for an illustrator. So I was like, okay, sounds exciting. So we were kind of looking at portfolios and stuff and seeing if someone wanted to like team up beforehand. But we hadn't really had, found like the right fit. And then she met the artist Michelle Mee Nutter at a conference. And Michelle was like just out of art school and didn't have like representation yet, or hadn't done any books. But my agent Joan met her and was like, I have this graphic novel. Would you be interested in like getting on board with it? And Michelle was kind of like, no, that's a really big project, So at first she was like, no, but she was like getting back on the plane to go home. And my agent Joan was like, well, why don't you like take it and read it and just let me know what you think. And so, Michelle read the stuff I had on the plane. And then when she landed, she was like, I want to do this. So that was my, luckiest break with all of this, because Michelle got on board, and she's such an amazing artist, and we just love working together and just worked really well together with the whole project. And it was really awesome too, because she was because we were like joining forces before it sold, then she was able to do character design, and we were able to like make sure we're on the same page and kind of like craft that initial vision before we actually sold the project. So that was just really great, because we were kind of just like equal team members from the start, and that's how we really approached the whole project, and like as equal storytellers. Even though we were both still mainly doing our singular roles, then we really, sometimes people like ask questions like, I don't know, they'll have a perspective like, it's my story, and Michelle was just like bringing it to life, but that's not how we view the project. We're both storytellers. And it isn't, and maybe it would be more like that if I had chosen to do a memoir. That's something I kind of left out. I debated whether to write a memoir, like Smile being the biggest example, or to fictionalize it. But ultimately, I just don't really like writing nonfiction. I wanted to write fiction, and I didn't want it to be about me as a character. I wanted to explore allergies and all these like real things that had happened to me, but like do it all through being able to shape the story the way I wanted, and with a like fictional cast of characters. So then we were able to get the project picked up by Scholastic, and work with a really great editor, Cassandra Pelham Fulton, and it's been really great.
I think Cassandra's on the call, right?
Oh, is she?
I think she's here.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Oh, Oh, I
Yeah.
see. I didn't see because you're just your picture. Hi. Oh.
Good. I was like, I was like, oh yes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. Good
Well,
to see
hi.
you.
Nice to see you.
Well, I actually have a ton of questions that came up as you were talking, Megan. There are just so many little nuggets in there of things that I wanted to know more about. But I before I ask anything, is there anything that came up for you guys that you want to ask? Because Megan, you gave such an awesome introduction to how you got started doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I have a question. Um, so you mentioned that your agent kind of brought in an illustrator with you. That's to me that sounds unusual. That so she brought her into the representation, and then the you she arranged everything to work together, and all that. I'm just very curious.
Yeah, let me explain that better. So she actually met her, but Michelle, the illustrator, she is represented by a different agent. Um, so she didn't have an agent at that point, but then she did soon after that. So, yeah, we have different agents, but it was my agent who met her and, like, gave her the manuscript that I had so far and, like, brought us together in that way.
That's
Is that
really fantastic. Wow. And yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah, it felt very serendipitous because we really loved working together, and yeah, and they just both happened to be at the same conference, so that was really
Can
great.
I ask a question too? So, did your agent have any qualms about you doing a graphic novel because you're the writer? Because we often hear that if you're not the writer and illustrator, and we're both writers,
Mm.
neither one of us are illustrators, that it's very hard to break in. So, I was just curious, how can writers break in to writing graphic novels?
Yeah, well, I can only speak to my experience, which I don't know how representative that is of. I always feel like there's things you can do, and then there's also elements of luck and chance involved. So I don't know how representative it is of what, like broad advice, but I guess I have tried to write scripts that are very clear and easy to read, like well organized, easy to follow, and so I try to make it easy for the editor or an artist to read and get the vision for the story, by having just even just like the formatting and everything, just by having it be not having those obstacles because they don't have the art that they can just see so easily. So I try to kind of make everything else as easy as I can, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, thank you.
So how did the actual well, let me ask you a question. One thing I noticed when I was reading Allergic is that the silent panels were so effective. And so I'm wondering from the very beginning, was that something that you did deliberately, that you did you write out all the silent panels that Michelle then drew?
Michelle definitely um, is free to like change the paneling or add a beat or rearrange things. I do include moments like that in the script as well. I know some like comics writers will write it more like a screenplay where there's kind of like these are the things that will happen, but they don't have it like broken down. But I like break down each panel in the script with the like and I know that Michelle knows she can like change it if she wants to or needs to, so it's not like I'm like this is the way it must be. But just for me to get those emotional beats down, then I need to have it like organized like that, or else I just won't be able to get this story out of my head in the right way, I feel like. So I will include stuff like that in the script. And then I will say, like working with Cassandra, then she is really good about like, you know, oh, I don't think we actually need this narration here, or, you know, like paring it down, because we don't want like the art and the text to be repetitive, or,
Right.
you know, let the art shine when you don't really need that text there.
I have a question. I really appreciated your introduction and your talk. That was great. Thank you. I was wondering, when you were looking for your agent, did you know that you wanted to write across so many different categories? And is that something that you discussed? And did you present all of your different types of work?
So I did send her the picture books and a middle grade novel I had been writing at the time. I think it was a middle grade fantasy novel, which nothing ever came of that. And I don't even think any of the, maybe one of the picture books I sent her, I had sent her like 6 different picture books over like 6 months, because she kept asking to see more. But I don't think any of those sold either. Maybe one of them. So I did send her the picture books and a middle grade novel, but at that point I wasn't trying to write graphic novels, and but I did know from reading like interviews with her that she was like okay with authors who wanted to like do a wide range of projects. That she didn't expect you to just like, you know, do one thing the whole time.
Okay, so can I follow up on that a little bit? So you sent your agent initially, when you, before you had started working with her, you sent her, it sounds like 6 different projects.
I think I
But
just sent her one to start with. And she
oh,
was
okay.
like, oh, this is, I don't remember what she said, but something like, oh, I like this, you know, keep me in mind, send me more. So I just kind of kept sending things as I finished them. And yeah, it was about 6 months from the first thing before she was like, you know, let's chat about representation. So I wouldn't have kept sending her stuff if she had just been like, you know, no thank you, but she was always kind of like, oh, keep me in mind or something. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep sending stuff.
And what was the very first project that you did end up selling with her?
So my first book is a picture book called Finding Wild, and it's kind of a lyrical celebration of spending time outdoors, no matter what your surroundings are, and finding, you know, kids playing outside and finding wild. So, yeah, that was the first sale, and that was one where it's kind of funny because you write some things and you're like, oh, I could totally see like where this is in the market, and other things you're like, I don't know, but that was one where I took it to my writing group and they were kind of like, I don't know what this is, and and then I was so surprised that that would be like the first thing I sold, and my picture book that like has done the best over the years, and like the one that I'll get like, you know, random emails from like adults about, where they're like, oh, I loved this, and and so it's just interesting because you really never know like what is the thing that's going to resonate with people.
So what that Finding Wild manuscript was not among the 6 projects that you initially sent your agent, or was it one of those?
No, it was something I wrote maybe a couple of months after
Uh-huh.
after I had signed with her.
Okay. Yeah, I love talking about this kind of thing because it just shows how it's such a process. And you know, you can't just write one manuscript and be like, okay, I wrote my manuscript. Now I'm gonna go get an agent and I'm gonna publish it and blah blah blah. It's so much trial and error. And
Yeah, definitely. I definitely would have been surprised, like, if I could have seen into the future, like how much rejection you still have even when you're like published, because still I would say like the majority of projects I make then don't get sold. So, and I never really know, like, to me, I'm like excited about all of them. And then, you know, a lot of them just don't end up either. You know, there's just too many factors at play, like beyond the quality of the work. You know, there's just the personal taste. There's a lot of times you'll get a rejection that's like, oh, we actually have something that's really similar to this. You know, there's just so many factors at play that you can't control. And so, yeah, it's just always interesting to see the things that, and you just feel, you know, you just be grateful when you can have successes. But yeah, it is surprising because I know from me, from like the outside looking in, if you see some like published author, you wouldn't expect that, like, oh, they like got 20 rejections on something like last month, you know. It's like,
Wow. So were there ever points where you felt like you might throw in the towel, like, oh, this isn't working for me? Or did you always kind of feel like, no, if I just keep at it, eventually it's gonna work out?
I don't know, like definitely was like throwing in the towel a lot. Um, just, yeah, just definitely got discouraged, especially one of the, I would say like the project that I went through that the most with was I have a kids novel coming out next year. And like, I started it like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe, before I even had the idea for Allergic. And it's like I wrote this version of it and my agent loved it and sent it around, and then like no one wanted it, but we got like one revision request, and like I tried to revise for that, but then I went through this cycle for years of like every revision I would send to my agent, like it would be worse. And like then it got like dramatically worse. Like I could tell she was just like, what's going on? And she'd be like, that initial one was like so good. Why? Like I just did all this stuff to it. And I just like, it got to, you know, every time I'd like hear back and I'd be crying and stuff. But then, and I'd be like, I'm going to give up. And then like the next day I would like tell, you know, my loved ones, I'm like, I'm done with that and stuff. And then like the next day I'd be all like opening my laptop. I'm like, I'll just work on it a little bit. So it's, I don't know if I was really like have stick-to-itiveness as much as just like I cannot seem to quit the projects even when I want to.
Okay, so now I'm super curious. So how did you get it from that point where your revisions were getting worse and worse to the point where now it's, you know, going to be coming out with a publisher?
Well, I think with that project I had to understand that like every book doesn't need to be everything and it can't be everything. And I kept thinking I was getting like so much better as a writer and having all these like great new ideas, and I was trying to like fold all that into it. But it's like a sweet young animal story about a cat that goes on this adventure because its owner gets sick, and the, you know, cat has to go off in search of help and goes on this big adventure in the forest. And like I needed to return to the initial vision and like stay true to the core of that, and like what that kind of what that type of story is promising a reader, because I think about that a lot, like what is this setup and this type of book. So not so much like where does it fit on the shelf from a marketing perspective, but from like an author to reader perspective, like if a kid is finding this book, like what are their expectations about that? And not that you can't like try to do something different with it, but like I also want it to be a satisfying experience, you know, just like if you're an adult and you're going to like a spy heist movie, like you want it to like, you know, be a spy heist movie, and they can like play with it in different ways and stuff, but you want that core to be there, you know? And so I felt like, oh, I'm doing this like kind of literary sweet animal story, and so how can I pare things down and stay true to that like initial vision.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of happened with with the second book that Michelle and I are making, the second graphic novel, then like my first draft, I felt like I got like so far away from like kind of what the promise of the story was, and I really had to go back to like what is the core of this going to be, and how can I like craft the problems and everything like more around that core.
Hey Megan, can you talk a little bit about working with Michelle? Like, did you guys like, were you showing her like a chapter and then she was coming back with illustrations, or?
Yeah, so Michelle's the best. Yeah, I wish we could have done this together. Like, you should do another one just with Michelle. That would be so great. But yeah, Michelle's so great to work with, and we probably have like less back and forth than you might think, because I think we both tend to just really like each other's like visions for the story, and we just have like some similarities in some ways. I think in like what we're liking in the story and stuff. So it's not like we're like always going back and forth, like chapter by chapter or anything like that. Like we're, well, with Allergic, then we like kind of did some like building of the initial thing. But in general, like, we're kind of doing it in tandem with our editor, where like I will write the script as like final as I can make it, through all the revisions and stuff, and then Michelle will read it, and if we have any things that come up or things we need to talk about, we will, and then she'll do the sketches, and then we all review that together, and Cassandra will make notes and I will make notes. We'll compile them, if we have any back and forth at that point. And then she'll revise sketches. So it's kind of like we, do our separate thing, but then always like checking in, and also with our editor. It's like we have check-ins periodically throughout like the many steps of the process, to just with any questions, or just to make sure that we're all liking where things are going, and of course just to like edit and revise. I mean, we do a lot of like cutting of the text and rearranging and simplifying as the art develops.
Anybody else want to jump in with a question? Tintin?
Yeah, I want to know what the editorial process was like. Did the script change a lot once you got the editor, the character designs? Because it looks like you had a complete package at the beginning already.
Yeah, I mean, with Allergic, then I would say the overall story structure didn't change a lot. Like, that stayed pretty firmly in place. There were a lot of changes, simplifications, clarifications, like, a lot of stuff like drawing out a character more, or like, let's have a beat between these characters, or let's bring out the emotions more here, things like that. I mean, I'm sure there was some overarching stuff, but there wasn't a ton with and then with the character design, then if you see the original ones, then you could definitely like, they look really similar, but they also did develop quite a bit, became a more polished version. And then we did have one of the characters, Maggie's friend Claire, who just the initial design just didn't end up working, and her hair and features and her design ended up being reworked quite a bit. She had the most changes. So yeah, those were the biggest changes. And then we actually had a Scholastic arranged for an allergist to read the script, So after we had it pretty polished, then the allergist read it, and then we made, some fine-tuning changes to make sure everything was accurate as far as the allergies went.
I just realized that we have questions in the chat, which I hadn't noticed.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Do I pronounce your name Aggie?
Yeah.
I see you nodding. Well, you can ask your question. You had a question about how long it took to finish.
Yeah. How long it took me to write the manuscript?
So it was about, I'm trying to remember exactly, but I think it was about a year to 18 months. It was like 9 months from when it sold to when. The reason I hesitate so much is because there was kind of a longer period where I was like learning how to write comics and also, developing the initial chapters. And then once it sold, it was about like 9 months until I had, the final version of the script. But then for the next, so if I have my years right, for the next at least 6 months, I don't know if I'm off by a whole year though, then as Michelle was doing the art, then the art with the text became the new working document, and at each stage then we'd go through and adjust the text with that. So it kind of depends on where you're starting and stopping that process.
Where did Michelle come in the process?
Let's see. So I had about 5 rough chapters written, and like a rough outline, and that's when we teamed up, and she read that and created some character designs, and then we sold it pretty quickly after that.
Thank you.
So we just had a question from Marty in the chat about how the project originated, which you did sort of talk about, at the beginning of this conversation. But the second part of Marty's question about what you used as a mentor or mentor text, I guess, or studied for style, I was very curious about that because you said you went to the library and you read a lot of books. So I'd love to know which books you found most helpful for you. And then I think you said you took some online courses. So I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, I could give you those links to share afterwards. I'm trying to remember I think it was through Coursera.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a free platform. It's one of those ones where like you can pay if you want to get like a certificate of completion. But and I like never like totally do all the like homework and stuff. I was mostly like watching the lectures because I think I can't remember the name of the one I did, but it was geared towards like an artist. So, and then I really like the comics books by Scott McCloud. That helped me learn a lot of like, I mean, you guys probably already know this stuff, but like I didn't know like any of the terminology and stuff, so that was really helpful. And then I knew I was going for like the, middle grade realistic fiction type book. So I looked at like Smile, of course, and Raina Telgemeier's books, Real Friends, El Defo, and the Sunny books by the Holmes. And then, yeah, I think those were my main ones where I was kind of like taking them apart. How many pages are these? I didn't want to like imitate the content of them, but I wanted to see kind of like what's the, like, I mean, I had no idea. I was like, do you put 20 panels on a page? You know, like I just wanted some kind of structure to help me like get the basics down, and then I could change it as seemed best for the story. But it really helped to have like, okay, I'll go for, you know, around this page range, around this word count, around, you know, like, oh, like they're only having pages with a single, you know, like a full spread, just like one panel, like I can't remember what those are called right now, but they're only having that like 3 times in the book, you know, just noticing that kind of stuff. And probably a lot of people who are just like more from the comics world, that is more intuitive, but I kind of, because I came more from the world of kids books and, you know, really falling in love with graphic novels, but I wasn't like immersed in the world of comics since I was young. So it really helped me to just like kind of analyze all those details.
Kim, did I notice that you looked like you had a question?
I did. I was wondering, I also write novels and I'm writing my first graphic novel script right now. And I'm wondering if there was one craft tip you have for going from writing novels to writing comic scripts, or like one really great thing you learned during the editing process.
I would say to really think about the unique tools that you have available in comics that are different from when you're writing a novel, and how you can best use those tools with specifically like the beats with the panels, the page turns, the sound effects, the varying effects you could create with like contrast with the words and the art, or not just contrast, but a lot of different effects you can create with that. So yeah, I would just try to kind of think about what ways. I just think a lot of art forms can excel in many areas, but have things that are like kind of shine the most in that. Like, you know, in a play, it's like there's so many like, it's like dialogue, you know, is such a big thing. In like a movie, I mean, there's more than one thing you could say, but like one thing that jumps to mind for me is like the cinematography, or like the relationship between like music and cinematography. And, you know, with picture books, a huge thing for picture books is like the page turn moments, because like a little kid feels like so much suspense in those moments. And it's just so amazing to see like the humor or the surprise they can get just from that moment of turning the page. And there's just things with comics and the form with the panels, and the relationship between the art and the text that you can't really do the same way in anything else. So just really try to like play to those strengths and take advantage of that. That was a long answer for the one tip, but
That was a great answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really, really great. Yeah.
I have a question. So that was really exciting, that what you just talked about. And so did you find yourself like feeling almost like a detective, because it was like, you know, all right, how can I do this? And figuring ways to take your narrative and make it work in the comic form, do you know?
Yeah, I love that feeling. I was definitely the kid where like, if my parents were like, can you do the dishes? I'd be like, no, I don't want to. But if like I thought of doing it, I'd be like, ooh, I'm gonna do that. And like, so for the whole process of learning to write graphic novels, it was like, I have this agent, but for my picture books, like I don't know anyone who writes comics. Like it's just totally I've never even like met someone, and I'm just like, this is like my secret project. And I like love that feeling. And I always try to have some project that like no one knows about, even because it just makes me happy and just feel very creative, because there's like no pressure. It's like no one knows I'm trying to do this. If it doesn't work out, like it's fine. So yeah, I loved like learning the whole thing and figuring it out, and it was definitely like decoding some secret universe that I hadn't been part of at all.
I love that idea of a secret project. I feel like that kind of is the polar opposite of what I often recommend to people. I often tell people that you should talk about your big goals, and you should, because you want to be held accountable somehow. You don't want to just always keep it in the realm of fantasy inside of your head, but like put it out there into the world. But this idea of secret projects is very intriguing to me.
I know some people are like that. Like I see people doing like the 100-day projects on Instagram, and they're like, announce your intentions, like follow through. You'll have accountability with everyone who sees it and stuff. And that just does not work for me. I mean, some things like having a deadline or something can give me accountability, but for me, I'm just like, oh, it's ruined. Like everyone knows about it. Like I want it to be my special thing that like I'm working on my own. So yeah, it's just different, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I have another question then, I guess. So picture books, are you going to continue working on picture books, do you think?
Well, I'm not really writing any right now, because I have like, I don't know, like 10 that are, that my agent was like, okay, these are ready to go, but like have not sold. And I just haven't sold one in a long time. Like I had 4 come out like 4 years in a row, but they actually all sold like really close to each other. And so yeah, I think like it's just a tough market, and I think the ones that haven't sold are similar quality to the ones that did sell. So I mean, I don't think like, I mean, my picture books weren't like amazing bestsellers, but they did fine. So for whatever combination of reasons, then they just haven't been selling. So I kind of at first I was like, well, I'm just gonna keep writing them because I'm really enjoying it. But then I did hit a point where I'm like a little discouraged with it, but then also like it just feels kind of pointless when I'm like, I have this huge backlog, and like with picture books with an agent, like you can write so many of them, but like they're not going to send all those out at once. They'll like maybe like send 2, because there's just like not enough people to and like you start to go through the list, and all these people have already rejected it. So it's just a combination of kind of like practicality and just being more excited about other things. But if those sell, or if I have some really specific idea, I think the picture books I liked as a kid and that I tend to write are kind of very like quiet, like bedtime, like sweet picture books. And it's just like hard for a really quiet book to, it's just hard to sell really quiet books, and kind of hard for them to find their place, even though I think there's a lot of kids who do really like them. But I think there's just a lot of people who like to write them too. So that's right.
So then I was wondering, like, did you ever think of your picture books possibly fitting into a graphic illustration type thing? Not like, I do agree with you that you have so many projects right now, it's not really major, but as a picture book writer, I sometimes daydream as like, moving the narrative of the thing into more of a graphic situation, which happens in picture books now, in a way.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
I do look at them and analyze that. I haven't found, I've seen some picture books that are kind of like hybrid, where there's still definitely like a picture book, but it'll have like some paneling and stuff. And I haven't really done that. I did have a picture book that called Super Pancake, and it was kind of weird for me as a picture book because I don't usually try to write funny stuff, but I was being goofy and I wrote this, and but it didn't sell, even though my agent, and usually when I tried to send her funny stuff, she'd be kind of like, why don't we, she's like really nice, but she'd be like, why don't we like stick with some of your stronger pieces, you know? So, but but she liked this one, and she tried to sell it as a picture book, and you know, no one bought it. But then after I learned to write comics, then I was like, you know, I think that one could be actually a really good graphic novel. So we actually did sell it as graphic novel. It's like a little younger than Allergic, like more like a chapter book, like more like Baby Mouse or Lunch Lady, if you're familiar with those ones. So we sold 2 books, Super Pancake and the Mini Muffin Mayhem. So yeah, that's kind of my zany side project. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully kids will like that and appreciate the weird breakfast humor.
So one thing that you just mentioned about the type of picture books that you write being kind of quiet picture books reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you, because you come across to me as being also kind of a quiet person. And one of the things that I think a lot of creators wrestle with and tear their hair out about is like building an audience and marketing and weaving in the promotion or self-promotion with the creative work. So how do you approach that?
I only do stuff that feels like a natural fit to me as far as like social media. I've done Instagram for a long time. I'm not doing it as much because they've made so many changes with preferring video and stuff. So it's gotten kind of frustrating because now like you post stuff, but like only like 10% of the people who follow you see it. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with this conundrum. So that's kind of disappointing because that was actually a really nice space, I felt like. And I tried doing Twitter like a couple times, but I was like, I'll never work again if I'm on this website. Like, I can't do this. Like, it really stressed me out because I was like, oh, I'm like missing things, or like, oh, like this happened, I should have something to say. And I'm like, I can't have things to say all day. I have to work on this book. So yeah, I quit that. So I basically have just done Instagram, and I have like an author newsletter I'll send a couple times a year, and I just have a website. I am really shy, but I still do events and stuff. I get really nervous beforehand, but to me, I'm like, I feel like there would be a tipping point where it's like, okay, well, I can't really do as much like this. And like, if, you know, that's where you're at, then you need to like communicate that with your publisher and stuff. But for me, like, those things are worth it, and they don't cause, like, I get nervous and stuff, but like overall, I think they add to my life. You know, it's not like I am happy for the opportunities, and I get nervous before, but then I usually like enjoy doing them. So, but it was really fun doing stuff for Allergic, because Michelle and I have done a little bit separately, but mostly like we were doing events and stuff together. So then that definitely, it was nice. That was a great thing about being part of a team, because then we're like both nervous, and we're like texting each other before, and like and then yeah, it just felt, and then like even like promoting the book, that's a fun thing about having like a teammate, because you're all like it feels less like, look at me, and like you're like, I want everyone to love this because you did such a great job. And even like working with a team with a publisher, like it helped me to be less to feel less weird about like promoting the book, because I'm like, I want this book to be successful for everyone who like worked so hard on it. Like, so many people put in so much work on it, and you know, sometimes you can feel some pressure because you're like, oh, I want it to be successful for all of them, but also it can take like the edge off of feeling like, oh, I'm just like trying to sell stuff all the time or something, because you're like, no, like this was like a labor of love for like so many people, so I wanted to do well.
So what do you do with your newsletter? What do you talk about in your newsletter?
I mean, I feel like not super confident in it because I never know quite what to do. Like at first I was like, I don't know. At first I was like doing like, you know, little updates and then like a recipe or something and then, or just like book recommendations. I never know quite what to do. It's a work in progress, but I try to at least send it out like when a book is coming out, or you know, I have some big news. And lots of times I'll do like a giveaway exclusively for like newsletter, or like even if I have like some extra books, I'll be like, you know, like first come first serve, I'll like give these to newsletter people. So I mean, I feel like if you subscribe to a newsletter, then it should be like you get a little bit of, you know, extra perks or something. So I feel a little more valid, because there are people who like, some people who, you know, like discovered my first picture book on Instagram and have like consistently supported my stuff ever since, in like really nice ways. And so to me, like I really want to like give back to people who have been like so supportive of me like that. So I try to do little giveaways or things like that. Let's see, I've also done, if people are in like Kidlit, I've done like free Skype visits for World Read Aloud Day. That can be fun. There's like a Kate Mesner organizes it each year. You can sign up on her website. And then I'll like send bookmarks to the schools that I did it with. So I'll try to do some stuff like that, but I mean, I just know I'm not going to become like an influencer or like be like so amazing at like being an online personality. So I try to do what I can, but focus on like meeting my deadlines, getting my work done, creating new work, and you know, you just can't do it all. So
yeah. Any last questions? Oh, Ed Necessa asked, your picture books were published by Random House. How did your graphic novel end up at Scholastic?
Yeah, so the other graphic novels I was talking about, Super Pancake, those are going to be with Knopf, with Random House. I actually forget about this when I like tell the story of Allergic selling, but we did share it with my editor from of my picture books initially first, but she passed on it. So then it was, you know, sent out to a wide range of people, and we had, you know, multiple offers, and we like Graphics and Cassandra were like so excited about it from the start, and just seemed like such a good fit. And so it was really like, it was so exciting, of course, to have like multiple offers, but like Michelle and I were like, what do we do? You know, because it's like overwhelming. But then, you know, we talked about it after, you know, when it was coming out and stuff. We're like, oh, we like made the right choice. We're so happy we went with Scholastic. So yeah, it's been really great.
Yes. Well, any last question? We could. Megan, I think this was just really, really, really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your whole journey and going so detailed into your process and the beginning, the origin story of your life as a writer. That was super, super inspiring. So I hope everybody can unmute yourself and just say thank you.
Thank you. That was
Thanks. Thanks so much,
Thank
Megan.
you.
So
Loved
if
your
you
book.
guys don't have this
Awesome.
book,
Yeah.
make sure you get a copy.
I will.
Can't wait to read it.
Thank you for having me, everybody. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, we'll see
All
each other at a conference
Thank you.
someday.
Thanks